guys, Josh here. On July 13, 2022, Rune Factory 5 released on Steam, so of course I could not resist buying the game for a third time in order to see how it compares to the Switch version. I played for a few hours already, and in this video I will be covering the biggest differences between the Switch and the Steam versions of this game, and hopefully if you're undecided on which one to buy, or you're wondering if it's worth buying the game on both platforms, I think this video will make things a bit easier for you. I will talk about things like the graphics, performance, and controls. If you would like to know more about the gameplay of Rune Factory 5, I do have a full review of this game on my channel, so feel free to check that out. But now let's talk about the PC version specifically, and the first thing you will notice when launching the game on Steam is the configuration tool. That tool is pretty useful, and one of the things it lets you do is to pick the language for the text of the game as well as for the voices. You can pick between the English and Japanese voices, and for the in-game text there's English, Japanese, simplified and traditional Chinese, Korean, as well as French and German. And this is actually pretty cool because originally these languages were all divided between the Japanese, the Asian, and the Western releases of the game, but now they're all combined together, and you can, for example, have Japanese in-game text with the English voiceover, which you can't do on any other version of this game. So yeah, it's probably a very minor detail for most people, but I wanted to point it out. And I think if you like the freedom to play a game in different languages, I think that's a good point to consider for the Steam version. Besides languages, other settings include the input display, so you can have the game either display icons of controller buttons if you're playing with a gamepad, or keyboard keys if you're playing with a mouse and keyboard. Once again, small detail, but it's good to see. And you can also rebind most of the keys for the keyboard, which will give you a bit of flexibility to make the game more comfortable or accessible for you. But while we're talking about that, I do have to address the biggest issue I have with this part of the game, and that's the keyboard and mouse controls. That's how I play most of my games on PC. I don't know, maybe I am in the minority that still prefers that classic setup, but unfortunately they really did not change much of the game to adjust it to these controls, which is a problem I also had with the Steam version of Story of Seasons Pioneers of Olive Town. They did pretty much the same mistakes here. So navigating the menus feel very clunky. For example, usually in most PC games, whenever you move your cursor over an element in the menu, it would highlight or there would be some kind of feedback to let you know you can click on something. But here nothing happens until you actually click, which makes the menus feel a bit unresponsive or awkward at times. Another example of something that feels a bit odd is how if you look at the map, you will have two cursors. So there's going to be the one that you actually control with your mouse, and then there's a little hand that moves after you clicked somewhere, or you can also move it with the arrow keys. And I don't know, it just feels a bit weird to have these two cursors at the same time. I think they could have tweaked things a little bit to make it into just one cursor. There's other little things, for example, when you choose your birthday, there are little arrows to change between the seasons. But clicking on these arrows doesn't actually do anything. You need to right click anywhere on the screen if you want to go to the next month. It's just not intuitive, it just doesn't feel natural. Another example is in the menus. In the Save File tab, you can load a file by left clicking on it, but if you go to the Friendship tab, you can't view a character's details by left clicking on it. For some reason, you have to press E on your keyboard instead. And as you play, you will see that a lot of menus have just little inconsistencies like this. For example, many menus will have a scrolling bars. For some of them, you will be able to use the mouse wheel to scroll, but for the majority, you will have to click on the bar and drag it yourself, which is kind of annoying. I could go on and on with little details like these. All of these by themselves are not big deals, but when you combine everything together, you can see that they really have not done a lot of work to make the game enjoyable with a mouse and keyboard. The controls are very inconsistent, confusing, it just doesn't feel natural at all, it's clunky, and it really feels more like I'm emulating a Switch game on my PC than playing a proper PC game. Of course, you can still play with a mouse and keyboard if you'd like, if that's your only option, but it's not the best way to enjoy this game, and if you can, I would strongly recommend you play with a controller. I was not expecting much, as that's how Marvelous has been doing for most of their recent Steam ports, but it's still a bit disappointing, and it makes this port feel a bit lazy. So if you're playing with a controller, your experience should be pretty much like how it is on the Switch, so if that's what you're doing, you can just disregard that part of the review. So let's go to the next point. So another way this port seems a bit lazy is that half of the game settings, like the language, input, and graphics, are in the configuration tool before you launch the game. And the other half of the settings, those that were on the Switch, like the farm camera and the text speed, these are changed via the in-game menus. More confusing, however, is that some settings, like whether the camera axes are inverted or not, are shown both in-game and in the configuration tool. So if you invert them in the configuration tool, they will still show as normal in the in-game menu, but they will behave as inverted and vice versa. So basically, if you're having issues with the camera and it's not behaving properly, it could be caused by a mismatch between your in-game settings and your configuration tool settings. It just makes things a little bit confusing and overwhelming for no reason. I just wish they would have taken the time to consolidate all of the settings in one place. But of course, once you've got everything set up, you won't have to worry about that. And these are pretty much my only issues with this port. I think the biggest difference you'll see from the Switch version is the performance. The configuration tool has quite a few options in terms of graphics, so you should be able to find the right balance between visuals and performance for your machine. I will put the minimum requirements on the screen as well as the recommended ones. My own configuration leans a bit more towards the recommended ones, and I'm getting a pretty consistent 60 FPS when I play on high graphics. It does slow down a little bit when I'm recording, but usually I can play on high at 60 FPS and it runs pretty smoothly. It's definitely in any case a lot smoother than on the Switch. Of course, all of that will depend on your configuration, but I think even if you have an older PC, you should be able to play with them maybe medium or low graphics pretty smoothly. Also, one thing I need to mention is that the loading times were incredibly fast for me. I will put the Steam and the Switch version side by side for comparison. I'm pretty sure I could exit and enter a building multiple times on my PC, while the Switch version would still be processing the first loading screen. I'm also not getting all of the freezes and slowdown that happen when you exit a building on the Switch. It's a very smooth and quick transition. So if you were bothered by the performance of the game on the Switch, which I know a lot of people were, I think you might want to give this game a second chance on Steam. And if you're not sure whether or not it will run well on your computer, just keep in mind that Steam lets you refund the game within 2 hours. So you could always try it out on Steam, play and see how it goes, and then if it doesn't run on your PC, you can refund it. And if it runs well, you can just keep playing. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And yeah, I think the performance really is the best part about this version of the game. But another very good thing is the mods. So I will put a link in the video description to the Story of Seasons and Rune Factory modding community Discord, where players and modders are discussing modding for Rune Factory 5. And even though it's still very early, there are already some mods available. One of them actually lets you place furniture freely without the huge collision box, which, as you might know, is really annoying if you're trying to decorate your house, as you have these huge gaps between the furniture and the walls. And it's just really hard to decorate your house and make it look normal in Rune Factory 5, but that mod fixes everything. So just that by itself might make the Steam version worth it for some people. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what other mods the community will come up with in the next few weeks and months. We're just getting started and there's already a few interesting things on there. So that's very exciting. And yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say for the Steam version of Rune Factory 5. I do like the inclusion of all language settings in one version of the game. I like the performance and fast loading times. Also, the mods open the doors to so many possibilities. It is very exciting. But even though all of that is great, it still somewhat feels like a lazy port. Controls are completely not adapted for mouse and keyboard, which I think they should be if you're gonna port your game to PC. I think I would have preferred waiting a few more months and getting a proper keyboard and mouse support. But overall, I would recommend getting the Steam version if you did have issues with the Switch performance. But please play with a controller if you can, or if you want to get the best experience out of this game. If you already do have the Switch version and the performance did not really bother you, there's maybe not much reason to buy it again, except maybe for the mods. So if you're into the mods, I would recommend maybe just wait a bit until more mods are available, or maybe when the game goes on sale. But if you're not into mods and the performance didn't really bother you, then it might just be better to just stick with the Switch version of the game. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Have you played the Steam version of Rune Factory 5? Are you planning to get it or not? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe for more Rune Factory 5 content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.